Thank you for joining and welcome to Empowering Employees with Clicks and No Code. We're very excited to walk you through how you can easily configure your own automation and connections to remove repetitive tasks and also streamline your agreement processes with Clicks and No Code. And Ram and I will be your hosts for today's session. Ram is lead product manager here at DocuSign, and I'm Chaveli here. I'm a product manager at DocuSign as well. We're both focusing on our automation and connections to external systems initiatives. And for today's agenda, so we'll start with an introduction to agreement actions. We're then going to jump into a few demos. So one for agreement actions on the eSign side, and then we'll jump into a CLM demo. And next, we'll go over the framework, which is actually powering the solution behind the scenes. And then finally, we will go over next steps and visions on how you can join us in this journey to build more solutions and power your use cases. And with that, let's just jump into it. So we talk to customers all the time, and we constantly hear from them that some of the most time-consuming and error-prone parts of their agreement processes are having to manually route and track agreements for approvals and negotiations, having to re-enter and maintain information across multiple systems, and also having to integrate their agreement solutions with all of the other business applications they use every day. And a study conducted by Forrester seems to agree with that. The study showed that over 50% of the participants agreed that the lack of automation and connections to other systems resulted in process delays and wasted time. And 45% of the participants also agreed that this resulted in an increased error rate due to having to manually input information across multiple systems. Which is why here at DocuSign, we're democratizing automation through agreement actions, which are no-code solutions for common agreement processes. And the value of agreement actions is to give users the power to build simple automation that's easy to use and configure, resulting in faster time to value and also increased agility. Also, solutions that are business ready, meaning they're reliable and built on a trusted platform. So what are agreement actions? So agreement actions are the building blocks for building automation across your agreement processes. So think of it as Lego blocks that you can piece together in order to build your own structure. And there are three main pillars to agreement actions. So the first pillar is our events, and these are milestones that trigger an action or an activity. And common examples are, so for example, after an agreement is completed, or a candidate has signed the offer letter, or after a master service agreement was approved. And the second pillar of agreement actions are actions. And this defines the type of operation that will be triggered after the right event occurs. So for example, archiving and organizing your documents on your source of system of record after the candidate signed the offer letter, or creating a purchase order in your financial system of record after the master service agreement is approved. And finally, the third pillar of agreement actions are connections, which could be either within DocuSign or external systems. And this allows you to securely establish and maintain those connections to external systems of records. And these systems of records could range from simple document storage providers like Box or SharePoint to procurement systems like SAP Ariba to even CRMs. And by putting all of these three pillars together, you can easily build solutions across your entire agreement process. So with that, now let's take a look at agreement actions live in eSign and CLM. And I'll now pass it over to Ram for an agreement actions in eSign demo. Ram, over to you.
Thank you, Chaveli. Let me start sharing my screen. Chaveli, could you stop sharing, please? Thank you. All right, great. We're really excited to showcase agreement actions in action. So we'll go through a couple of demos here. What I am focused on is the e-signature portion of the product. So you'll see a portion of our Agreement Cloud products in general. I'll focus on the eSign demo. So the example here that I want to walk you through is one of an HR, human resources employee onboarding one. Typically, these days you get an electronic notification with an offer letter. You go through signing the offer letter. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. This is a candidate that just got an offer letter from DocuSign. They're signing on the dotted line, they agree with the terms and the employment conditions, as well as the offer, details around financial and position and whatnot. So let's go through and complete the process. They can also see, this candidate August can also see that they have certain fields like marketing. They're obviously getting hired into marketing, and they're getting hired in the country of Canada. As they finish that, right? From a candidate standpoint, they're all good, right? They're squared away. Everything's fine and dandy. They're gonna go figure out how to onboard themselves now, right? But on the department side, on the HR department at the hiring company, there's a whole bunch of processes that now need to be kicked off, right? And that's where agreement actions come in. Agreement actions allow you to kind of stitch together no-code components, the components that you saw from Chabeli, to put together the solution overall. So what comes to mind as part of the recruiting process is a few things, right? When an offer letter is signed, which is the event in this case, number one, you do need to store that agreement. It's now a legal agreement between the candidate or the future employee and the company. So you do need to store it in a system of record. So that's one obvious action, automated action that would be required. Number two, you're able to kind of export some of the data elements of that envelope. This could be the example that I showed you around country of hire, the department of hire, when they signed the offer letter, who else actually was involved in signing that legal agreement on behalf of the company, essentially the details of the envelope and the agreement overall that you want to capture, potentially in a system of record that's outside of DocuSign. And then third, there's a whole bunch of onboarding is not complete with an offer letter getting completed, right? There's a whole bunch of other activities that need to be kicked off. Number one, right, running a background check. Number two, setting up their systems access, account access, and whatnot. Number three, setting up their machines and facilities and a whole bunch of other activities. Now, could be also another one around sending them a benefits package, making sure they have all the things at their fingertips to onboard themselves. So that's where we'll walk through here agreement actions, how the demo is helping you kind of showcase the power of what's possible. So in this example, I'm showing you a team drive that's actually an HR human resources team drive where they're organizing their offer letters in a well-organized, by quarter, by candidate. And you can see here that I just completed August's offer letter has shown up in Google Drive. And you could also see that it contains all the details that have been filled out, right? All organized, shareable with the right team members in the shared drive, just the way you want it, right? We'll look at how to power this, but I want to walk you through the end user experience here. Number two is around exporting data, right? But with agreement actions, you're able to export data to Google Sheets and soon to be Microsoft Excel, where you can take all the data, put it in your system of record, in this case, a Google Sheet. So then you can slice that data and combine it into interesting reports, like the examples that I've shown you here is to kind of really look at, the country of hire, department of hire that, has been utilized over the past few months, right? In addition, you can do other interesting things to say, hiring plan, where are we on that hiring plan in terms of charts, like really empowering our admin and that end user to utilize the automation and build the reports that they like to utilize. Number three is the more complicated onboarding process, some of which may be manual, right? Running the background checks to setting up facilities, machine access, account access, and whatnot. And that's where CLM comes in. CLM has a very powerful workflow. And so if I refresh my screen here, you'll see an agreement action routing workflow has been kicked off as of 4 minutes ago that now is a much more orchestrated potentially manual set of steps that can be utilized using CLM workflow. I won't go into the detail of the workflow itself, but suffice it to say, it could be very complicated. It could be it's more well tuned to more of that orchestrator set of actions to complete the onboarding. Now, switching back to how this is all powered, right? So agreement actions are under the settings menu in an eSign account. And when agreement actions are available, you'll see essentially two components, the connections and rules. With the connections, as you might expect, this is essentially the place where you set up the applications or the connections that you want to utilize in concert with the DocuSign. So then your system of records can be updated appropriately at the right moments, right? In this case, the HR department is using employee onboarding is all stored in Google Drive. Onboarding workflows are managed in DocuSign CLM. And then they have also an HR department OneDrive, Microsoft OneDrive as well. In terms of applications, it's fairly straightforward on how you set up applications. This is kind of the suite of applications that we provide today. Now let's switch to really the brains of this automation, right? The rules. What essentially a rule contains is the stitched together business process that you want to maintain, right? So in the example that you looked at is an employee onboarding one. So let's go pull up that rule and take a deeper look at what it was doing and how it was achieving what we saw. Really, it goes back to the three pillars that Chabeli talked about, right? Number one, the trigger. The trigger point or the event is that completion of that envelope in this case, right? The completion of that offer letter signed by all parties is the main step, right? Obviously, a rule has the name and whether it's active, but in addition to the event trigger, we allow you to kind of set conditions, and the conditions are really an augmentation of that trigger to say, yes, when every envelope, any envelope in the account is completed, I want to evaluate it against these set of conditions, and these conditions here is the way the HR department typically does utilize templates is to say anytime an offer letter type of template is complete, I want to take actions, automated actions. In terms of other conditions that we can support, obviously, if you're an eSign user, you'll be familiar with all of these options. Pretty straightforward, pretty standard in that sense. And then you could pick the template of your choice to set the condition itself. And then coming down to the actions, the second and third pillars, it's really about driving those actions, the automated actions in the system of record. So the example that you looked at was store that agreement in a system of record, which was Google Drive, in a team shared drive with the certificate of completion included, as well as, if you notice the folder structure, a combination of static and dynamic fields that you can utilize to say, yeah, I want to organize my offer letters or by template names and the last recipient, which is essentially the candidate, and the envelope ID that I want to capture. So it's a unique identifier to that agreement. The second part of it was exporting the data out the spreadsheet. Again, as you might expect, simple, kind of interface where you pick the action, you pick the selection of the connection, and then pick the sheet that you want to export it out to. And then there's some guidance on how to utilize it. Similarly, starting the workflow, right? You pick the action, pick the application, and then the account, as well as the actual workflow that you want to trigger. So we're really, it's all about kind of making this as no code as possible, right? Low code, fairly straightforward for our admins to kind of configure on their own and utilize as we go forward. So with that, let me stop sharing and hand it off to Chabeli for continuing the demo onto the CLM side of things. Oh, sorry, I spoke too soon. Thanks, Chabeli. Yeah, so summarizing, what you did notice is again, the three pillars, right? Utilizing those events to drive actions in the connections. The simple interface allows you to kind of set that without any coding background whatsoever, and that's why clicks not code. And it, with the conditions themselves, you took a look at the types of conditions that you can configure, the data metadata of the envelope, as well as the actions which we support today. Let me now really hand it off to Chabeli. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ram. So now I'll go over and So now I'll go over and it will show how we've enabled agreement actions in CLM by creating the CLM connections framework. And this framework seamlessly integrates CLM with external business applications like SAP Ariba and NetSuite to automate a variety of agreement-related actions across CLM. So now let's take a look at a procurement demo. And for this demo, so I'll go over procurement flow. So the event will be an MSA that's been approved by legal. And then from there, the action will be creating a new contract workspace in SAP Ariba so that procurement teams can have access to all of the contract information and they can process downstream business processes within SAP Ariba. So for the demo, so I'm within my parties page in CLM, and I'll first play the persona of Billy Bayer. And today I've received a new master service agreement from a vendor we're doing business with named FlexCorp. So I'm in my parties page and I'm gonna go ahead. I can see all of the parties that I'm doing business with. So I'll go ahead and look for FlexCorp and click on that record. And then now I can see all of the agreements that we have from FlexCorp and also some additional information like active MSA and so on. So I'm gonna go ahead and upload that new MSA that we just received from FlexCorp. And then next, I'll go ahead and enter some information for this contract so that we can report on it later on. But also, this is the information that we'll be sending over to SAP Ariba so that procurement teams can also have access to this contract information. So I've entered all of my metadata data in this form. So now I'm going to go ahead and click Finish. And what's happening now is that behind the scenes, the CLM workflow was triggered. And the CLM workflow is the heart of CLM and is responsible for orchestrating all of the agreement processes. And what's happening now is that now that we've uploaded this new contract, the first step on that workflow is to route this contract to the legal team for legal approval before we actually send this over to SAP Ariba. So I'm going to go ahead now and change persona. So now I'm going to play the persona of Larry Legal. And I can see that Billy just sent me a contract for approval. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at that contract just to make sure everything looks good before we actually send this over to SAP Ariba. So I will take a quick look at the contract. Everything looks good. So I'll go ahead and approve this contract. And now what's happening is that the second step of that workflow was triggered. And that workflow is the connection step, which is now taking all of those contract fields that we enter at the beginning and automatically sending it over to SAP Ariba to create a new contract workspace so that now procurement teams can be notified that a new contract was approved and now they can issue purchase orders and other processes downstream. So if we now shift over to SAP Ariba, this is my contract workspace account. So I'll go ahead and refresh my contracts here. And I can see that this new FlexCorp MSA was automatically created in SAP Ariba through the connection. And if we take a closer look to this contract in SAP Ariba, we can see that the CLM contract link was sent over so that procurement teams can have a reference in case they need to take a look at the contract in CLM. We also send over the contract amount that we entered at the beginning, the supplier reference, as well as the effective and expiration dates that we all capture at the beginning of the process. And with that, we save Billy time and avoided any errors that might have occurred if he had to manually enter this information twice in SAP Ariba after the contracting process was completed. So now that we finalized more of the Billy Bayer process, now I'm going to shift over the admin experience and how admins can actually configure these connections to orchestrate the exchange of information across systems. So I'm going to go. So now I'm going to shift over to this admin section of CLM, And if you scroll down to connections, you can see all of the connections that admins have established within their CLM account. And so in order to establish a new connection, admins will just need to click on Add Connection, select the provider that they would like to establish a new connection for. And then next, they'll only need to enter the credentials for that integration user. So these are the users that you will configure on the, for example, in this case, the NetSuite side. And then after they enter all of those credentials, give this specific instance a name. That's all they need to do to securely establish that connection with NetSuite, for example. So with clicks and no code, admins are able to get up and running with this connection faster without having to deal with authentication that usually requires the most amount of time from a custom integration. And then in the future, if admins would like to make any changes or delete a connection, they can simply just click on that particular instance. And then they can see more information about the connection, and then they can either remove or manage the connection or disconnect, and then they can see more information as well. So this is the first step for establishing that connection. And then the second piece, which is really the orchestrator of information, it's the connection step, which is embedded within the workflow, the CLM workflow. So here over here, it's the workflow designer. And as you can see, this is the process that we just went over. So there was a legal, the legal approval was the event that triggered then sending that information over to SAP Ariba. And on the left side here, you can see all of the steps that you can use to put together your workflows. It's a very flexible designer. You can drag and drop steps at whichever point of the process where you would like them to be triggered. So, but specifically for this demo, I'll go over how to set up the connection steps. So if you would like to configure your connection steps, you just drag and drop them into the workflow designer, and then you click on this button here. And the first step is to first select which connection you like to use. So these are, as you can see, these are all the same connections instances that you saw on the connections page. So for the demo, let's say I would like to now create a NetSuite connection. So next, select the object type that you like to use for this particular configuration. So go ahead, let's say I wanna create a new vendor once this step is triggered in NetSuite. And these are all of the actions we currently support. So being able to create new records, update existing records, or retrieve information from existing records. But for the demo, let's say, so I would like to create a new vendor in NetSuite. So the next step is to establish those data mappings so that we know which CLM information we would like to send over to NetSuite to create that new vendor once this step is triggered. And the way admins would set up those relationships would be they will click on Add Field here. And then through this chooser, they can already see all of the fields that are available for the vendor object from NetSuite that they can use to then map CLM values to. So they can just easily navigate through this, through the chooser. Let's say I would like to populate the comments field, the company name, and let's say the email field. So they'll click Apply. And then the next step would be now to map those CLM values, which in this case are workflow variables, to each particular field in NetSuite. So I'm going to go ahead and click Select Variable. So I'm just going to map this to the comments variable. And then if, for example, you would like to enter some custom information, you just click on Custom Input. And then you can also customize what you would like to send over to NetSuite. And then also in the future, if admins would like to make any changes or remove any mappings, they can easily do so through the UI, add additional fields and so on, all without having to write any custom code. It's all done through this guided, dynamically populated UI. And just again, trying to make it as easy as possible for admins to get up and running with their connections without having to write any custom code. So this is all for our demo. So I'm just gonna jump into the slides. And then just to summarize here, we just saw how we can configure agreement actions within CLM with clicks and no code through the connections framework. And then how easy it was to define actions and data mappings through that guided and dynamically populated UI. And then finally, also how to establish and maintain those connections to external systems such as SAP Ariba. And with that, and I'm gonna pass it over to Ram again, and then we'll go over some frequently asked questions.
Yeah, thanks, Jabal. Actually, before we do that, there seem to be a few questions too. before we jump into the FAQ, we should probably try to answer some of these questions. Let me give you what I think is a question for you. I'm doing last in. Chabeli, for you, what would happen next if the legal department rejected the contract and added a comment? I guess this is a generic question, may not be in the context of your demo, but that may not be relevant to, Do you want to comment?
I can comment on that. So all of that, depending on, for example, if legal rejects the contract, so through the same workflow designer, you can set conditions. So if there's an approval, then send it over to SAP Ariba. If not, maybe route it to another team. So all of that, the workflow designer is very flexible. It can be configured as per depending on conditions and your own agreement process. So that's definitely something that could be configured through a set of conditions so that it could be routed to the right teams if they need to make corrections or make any adjustments to the contract.
Great. And then one other question, two questions around really connections and integrations. Oracle Apex and OnBase, are they on the roadmap? I guess is the question.
So they would love to hear more about the use cases. But that's something that we could explore afterwards.
Yeah. And we'd love to, I guess I'll make a general plug here for folks, Donna, Rachel, Sarah, who asked the question. We'd love to hear more about the use case. Obviously, we are considering more integrations, more actions across the board. But we'd love to get into the use case and the specifics to get there. And then I answered a few more questions online. But one probably was around, are the events also triggered by integrations that we saw yesterday, like Power Automate and ServiceNow? This is a great question, Kevin. I think this is where we're headed overall. The ability to kind of utilize the framework overall, and we'll look at the next few slides in terms of how we're thinking about this. But this is spot on in terms of how we're approaching this, how integration is going to be so critical, so that you could utilize these three pillars in potentially different ways to stitch together automation in general. Do you want to go through a summary, Chabeli, of the what connections are supported on the CLM side, and then I could do the same. There are a couple other questions here.
Yeah, definitely. So at the moment on the CLM side, we support connections to SAP Ariba, Workday Financials, and NetSuite Financials. In addition to our previous Salesforce integration, the first-class integration.
Right. And on the eSign side, most popular cloud storage providers are supported. Those are Box, Dropbox, Google Drive, Microsoft SharePoint, Microsoft OneDrive, and DocSend CLM. Those are the primary ones. I'll take the number two to what actions are supported. The demo pretty much showed you, the actions today. We'll get into some specifics of future actions, but it's to archive, export data, and kick off workflows. And in terms of tracking automation, I think this is one where the potential is huge. Where more and more as admins and the no-code kind of citizen developer are utilizing frameworks like ours, we see a clear need for sort of an control engine of some sort, where you're able to look at control center, where you're able to look at the automation in flight. So we do have that in agreement actions, both in CLM and in eSign, where you're able to see the results of the automation and track success and failure. And we see an immense need to kind of improve that, improve retries and whatnot as well. Okay. A couple of other questions that we can get to maybe as we get to the later slides here. Chabeli, do you mind? Oh, yeah, thanks. Great. So as kind of summarizing here what you've seen, right? you've witnessed the components and the solutions in action, and these components are pretty integral to the no code framework and the vision that we have on no code solutions that we're building. The demos really focused on two primary use cases that we showcased. These are just but two examples. For the HR employee onboarding one, you saw how offer letter getting signed by the candidate triggered actions to archive, export data, start workflow within DocuSign CLM, within the DocuSign Agreement Cloud in DocuSign CLM, as well as in Google Drive. And the other demo that you saw on the CLM side, you saw how the event of an agreement approval triggered the creation of a new contract workspace in SAP Ariba, so that POs can be issued downstream in the SAP Ariba system for that procurement use case. These are but some of the events, right? Actions and connections we demoed and support. We obviously have multiple other connections that we support, Microsoft, Google, NetSuite, and so on. And it's really the tip of the spear in terms of our vision to remove these manual repetitive tasks that you as an admin or a citizen developer have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Given the immense scope for automation, it's really the opportunities in front of us as well, right? It's not this journey is far from complete. We're probably just beginning on this, right? And so the opportunity as we look ahead, it's really on two fronts, right? It's to utilize the purpose-built tool set that we have today, as well as the ability to extend the tool set available. So let's take a look at the details here. If you don't mind going to the next slide, thank you. So when we think of building on essentially the purpose-built solutions that are available today, so whether you're an admin looking to automate your manual tasks, day to day that you're facing pain on, or you're a leader of digital transformation at your business, you should really want to look at purpose-built automation that we put together here. So you can kind of stitch together the right solution for your needs. There are tons of other use cases, right? We've had requests on, triggering or really acting and a new action of creating an envelope once one envelope gets complete, right? That's a request that has come into us. We've also had requests to really deepen integrations. For example, supporting SharePoint lists, broaden integrations. Few FAQs came in today too, with supporting other storage providers, supporting other procurement systems, supporting CRMs, whatnot, right? So what we really wanted to do here was to kind of present the opportunity and then can start the discussion in this journey in concert with you, right? So if you're an admin in a department dealing with any of these use cases in HR, procurement, or legal, sales, others, we'd love to hear from you about sort of your daily repetitive pain points, right? So I think given that, we'd like to utilize the Q&A section of the presentation here for you to kind of throw in some ideas on use cases that you find are top of mind for you, aspects that you feel could be interesting where we should consider. This is kind of a mix of seeking input of where we should be focused, but also kind of almost determining some of the key pain points that you face the day to day. And with the point being, we really want to take this forward, right? We want to kind of partner up with you, and by sharing, some of these ideas, we want to take the next step in terms of determining the use case, determining the pain points, determining how agreement actions can help, how the no-code framework can be built the right way to support you on that journey. So we'll take a couple of pause seconds here, maybe 10 seconds for folks to start typing and throw some ideas out here. We'll have this recorded here, so we'll definitely follow up with you. And I take thank you for supporting us with some ideas here. Great. I see a few more folks typing in. Great. Good. 10 more seconds. Great. Chabeli, can we switch to the next slide, please? So in addition to the opportunity of putting together and, and stitching, really it's also about extending the no-code framework that we're building here, right? We know there's a whole ecosystem of partners that want to utilize the core platform that DocuSign brings, and I know that by bringing and connecting with partners, we could together kind of simplify business process across a suite of applications, right? So again, depending on the the broad areas of use cases and sales, legal, HR, procurement, others, really it's about combining forces. So if you're a partner solutions engineer or a developer, we want to hear from you, right? It's an ecosystem expansion opportunity. We've had customers ask for specific integrations with specific industry vertical solutions. Healthcare comes to mind, financial services, but we know we can't do it alone, right? It's also a huge ecosystem that we could tap into here. So if you're a partner developer or a partner solutions engineer, we'd love to hear from you as well in the Q&A section here, so that we could tag team and build together solutions for our mutual customers. To give it another 5 seconds here, I see a few questions or comments coming in, which is great, and then we can kind of bring it together for conclusion. Okay. Great. Wonderful. So let me take one last look. Are you seeing any questions that you think we should answer here, Chabeli?
Yep, I'm looking through it.
I know we're okay on time. We got at least 3 minutes here.
Let me reviewing the questions.
All right, I think we may be good.
Yeah, I think maybe we can share the contacts and.
Yeah, let's do that. So in conclusion, obviously we'd like to thank you for attending the session. We're really we know we're just getting started on this no-code journey, with the vision, like Chabeli said, around really democratizing automation for our customers, you, as well as community overall, right? So as you think away, take away, kind of recall back the demos that you saw today, other sessions that you attend today. We'd like to kind of keep agreement actions and this no-code journey in mind, and we'd love to kind of discuss as we're just beginning on this journey, and we hope to partner up with you very soon. Thank you so much for your time, and you know how to reach us, so we're happy to hear from you anytime.